Our bonus story is called Mr. Men and Little Miss in Australia, written by the same artists. Mr. Topsy-Turvy was very excited. "Where guess we're all two going?" he asked to Miss Summersault. "Where are we all going to?" said Miss Summersault, correctly working out Mr. Topsy-Turvy's back-to-front muddled-up way of speaking. "We're going up over," cried Mr. Topsy-Turvy. Miss Summersault looked confused. "You know, up over on the other side of the world." And then Miss Summersault got it. "You mean down under?" That's Australia, where everything is upside down," grinned Miss Summersault. "The perfect places for you." And Mr. Topsy-Turvy's mouth turned down. But he wasn't sad. It was just one of his upside-down smiles. What a confusing man. Now, of course, everything was not really upside down when they got to Australia, but it had been a very long flight, and they were tired, so they decided to spend a day relaxing on Bondi Beach. Although it was not so relaxing for Mr. Wrong. He was supposed to swim between the two safety flags, but got the wrong flags. And he had to be rescued by the lifeguards when he was pulled out of the sea by the current. It was rather embarrassing, although not as embarrassing as Mr. Lazy's nose. He was too lazy to put on any ice sunscreen, and then fell asleep in the sun. Feeling refreshed the next day, they went on a tour of Sydney to see all the sights. The highlight of the day was climbing the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It was a spectacular view from the top. Well, a spectacular view if you had a good head for heights like Mr. Tall. Not so good if your name was Mr. Jelly. From Sydney, they sailed down the coast and across to Tasmania to see the wildlife. The kind of wildlife that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. There were wombats and platypuses and echidnas and kangaroos and koalas and possums. There were so many new animals it made Mr. Dizzy's head spin. And of course, there was the Tasmanian devil. Miss Scary had a lot in common with him. They sailed back to the mainland and to Melbourne, where Mr. Silly had entered the Melbourne Cup, a world-famous horse race. However, Mr. Silly, being Mr. Silly, could not do things sensibly. Oh no, not Mr. Silly. Not surprisingly, Mr. Silly did not win the cup. So to cheer him up, they went for a drive along the Great Ocean Road to see the 12 Apostles. Although Mr. Tickle has his own plan to cheer up Mr. Silly. Then they drove further up the coast to Adelaide, where Little Miss Summersault had organised a cricket match. Out in the field, Miss Summersault's team were very good. Mr. Dizzy's bowled his specialty spin ball, the Giggly Google. Miss Summersault was truly acrobatic in the slips, and out on the boundary, nothing could get past Mr. Tickle's long arms. Unfortunately, their batting lineup was not quite so strong. Mr. Worry wore Mr. Tall's pads because he was so nervous. Mr. Topsy-Turvy got everything the wrong way round, and Miss Scatterbrain couldn't work out which sport she was playing. "Let's go east," suggested Mr. Topsy-Turvy. So they went west, which is of course what he meant. They went west on the Indian Pacific train, all the way along the Great Australian Bight, across the Nullarbor Desert to Perth. And like all their journeys in Australia, it was a very long way. "It's a very flat country," grumbled Mr. Grumpy. "Yeah," laughed Mr. Rude. just like the top of your head. The same as my fish dinner, chuckled Mr. Greedy. Flat head. On a day out from Perth, they went on a bush tucker walk and learned what the indigenous people ate out in the Australian bush and how they hunted. Mr. Topsy-Turvy discovered that boomerangs do come back, and Mr. Greedy learned that they were actually was food he didn't want to eat. A widgety grub. That night they enjoyed a delicious bush tucker barbecue under the stars. It was a long flight from Perth to Darwin, at the very top of Australia. This was the highlight of Miss Sunshine's holiday. She had organised a safari in the Kakadu National Park. There were lots of wildlife to see, some of which was friendly, and some not so friendly. And there was even more wildlife when they got to the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Cairns. Underwater wildlife. Miss Curious had never seen so many fish. However, Mr. Topsy-Turvy couldn't seem to get the hang of snorkeling, and his attempts at surfing on the Gold Coast were no better. Miss Somersault laughed so much she nearly fell off her board. Well, we've been all the way around Australia, announced Miss Somersault. I think it's time to see the middle. So they all caught the bus to the Red Centre. What a surprise! Another flat desert, whinged Mr. Grumpy, although it was not at all flat. No, not at all flat when they got to the MacDonnell Ranges. It was very hot in the middle of Australia, but a swim in the Billabong soon cooled them off. That night they slept out under the bright desert stars, and little Miss Somersault had some wonderful dreams. Excuse me. They had a wonderful trip down under, and they had learned a lot about Australia. The snowy mountains were snowy. There were kangaroos on Kangaroo Island. The blue mountains were blue. The great sandy desert was sandy. The bush was bushy. But much to Mr. Mean's disappointment, there was no gold on the Gold Coast. They had one day left in Australia, and they couldn't decide what to do until Miss Somersault saw a sign. "Look," she cried, "there's a camel race in Alice Springs. It's the perfect race for you, Mr. Silly." "You're right," agreed Mr. Silly. Everyone else decided to join in, and Mr. Silly rode in the race on hold on a minute. A kangaroo! What a silly Billy. That's it for me. See you soon.